I never thought my world would shatter at my own son's wedding. But that's exactly what happened on what should have been the happiest day of Jason's life. The morning had started perfectly. The venue, an elegant vineyard estate overlooking rolling hills, was everything Jason and Emma had dreamed of. I'd spent hours helping with the decorations, making sure every detail was perfect for my only son's special day. The ceremony was beautiful. Emma looked like an angel in her grandmother's restored wedding dress, and Jason couldn't take his eyes off her. Even my husband David seemed to be in great spirits. He gave a touching speech during the ceremony about love and commitment that brought tears to my eyes. If only I'd known those tears were just the beginning. The reception was in full swing. The dance floor was packed, the champagne was flowing, and laughter filled the air. I was sitting at the main table, watching Jason and Emma have their first dance as husband and wife, when I noticed David checking his phone for the 100th time that evening. "Everything okay?" I asked, touching his arm gently. He jerked away as if my touch burned him. "Fine," he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. "Just some work stuff." I should have known something was wrong. David had been distant for months, working late, going on more business trips than usual. But I'd been so busy helping with wedding preparations that I'd pushed my concerns aside. Besides, we'd been married for 25 years, we'd weathered rough patches before. To my left, my best friend Megan caught my eye from table 7 and raised her champagne glass in a toast. We'd been friends since college, and she'd been my rock through everything: my parents' deaths, Jason's rebellious teenage years, even that rough patch in my marriage 10 years ago. I smiled back, not knowing she'd been hosting more than just our weekly book club meetings at her house. The evening progressed, and it was time for the father of the groom's speech. David stood up, straightening his tie. I expected another beautiful speech about love and family, like the one he'd given during the ceremony. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "I have an announcement to make." The room fell quiet. Jason stopped dancing with Emma, turning to look at his father with a confused expression. "Sarah," David said, looking directly at me, "I found someone better. I want a divorce." The silence in the room became deafening. 200 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. I heard Emma's mother gasp. "What?" Jason stepped forward, his new bride clutching his arm. "Dad, what are you doing?" David continued as if our son hadn't spoken. "I've been unhappy for years, Sarah. You were too busy being the perfect mother, the perfect hostess, the perfect everything to notice." But Megan noticed. She understood me. Another collective gasp. I turned to look at table 7, where my best friend of 20 years sat, her face flushed but defiant. She met my eyes without shame. The pieces fell into place. The late-night book clubs, the business trips that coincided with Megan's writing retreats, the way David had insisted we invite her to sit at one of the front tables at the wedding. I should have been angry. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. Maybe because deep down, I'd known something was wrong. Maybe because I'd been preparing for this moment without realizing it. I reached for my purse. "Sarah," David said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he'd perfected over the years, "I know this is a shock, but Megan and I—" "How long?" I interrupted, my voice steady as I pulled out a cream-colored envelope. "What? How long have you been sleeping with my best friend?" David's face reddened. "That's not—" "8 months," Megan spoke up, standing from her table. "We fell in love, Sarah. We didn't mean for it to happen." I nodded slowly, opening the envelope. 8 months. That's interesting, because I've known for 6. David's face went from red to pale in an instant. "What? Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The lipstick stains that weren't my shade. The credit card charges from hotels across town. The way you both looked at each other when you thought no one was watching." I pulled out the contents of the envelope. "Or maybe you thought I was too busy being the perfect everything to hire a private investigator." David's eyes fixed on the stack of photographs in my hand. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Mom?" Jason's voice cracked. Emma held his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, honey," I said, looking at my son. "I didn't want to ruin your wedding. I was going to wait until after your honeymoon to deal with this. But since your father chose this moment—" I turned back to David. "Would you like to see the pictures, dear? The investigator was very thorough." Got some great shots of you and Megan at that little bed and breakfast in Vermont. You know, the one you told me was a business conference. David lunged for the envelope, but I held it out of reach. Or maybe we should talk about the joint account you opened with her. The one you've been funneling my inheritance money into. That's when David started screaming. You had me followed. You invaded my privacy. You had no right. I stood up slowly, my voice still calm. No right? I'm your wife. I had every right. And thanks to these pictures and the financial records my lawyer has already collected, I'll have every right to take you for everything you're worth. The wedding reception had turned into chaos. Guests were whispering, some were leaving, and others were openly staring at the drama unfolding before them. Emma's parents had rushed to the newlyweds' side, trying to shield them from the scene. You calculated, manipulative witch. David was still shouting, his face now purple with rage. You've been planning this for months. I smiled, keeping my composure. Actually, I learned from the best. You taught me all about planning, didn't you? Like how you planned those romantic getaways with Megan while I was taking care of your sick mother. Megan stepped forward, her designer dress rustling as she moved. Sarah, please. You're making a scene. Think about Jason and Emma. The audacity of her statement made me laugh. Oh, now you're concerned about them. Were you thinking about Jason when you were sleeping with his father? Were you thinking about him when you sat in my kitchen every Sunday, drinking my coffee, eating my food, all while planning to destroy his family? Mom's right. Jason's voice cut through the tension. He stepped away from Emma and faced his father. How could you do this? Today of all days. David's expression softened as he looked at our son. Jason, you don't understand. Your mother and I, we've been unhappy for years. Megan makes me feel alive again. No, Dad, what I understand is that you're a coward. Jason's words were sharp, precise. You couldn't even wait until after my wedding to blow up our family. Emma walked up behind Jason, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her wedding dress whispered against the floor as she moved. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice trembling but firm, I think you should leave. David looked around the room, suddenly seeming to realize where he was and what he'd done. The wedding guests were no longer pretending not to stare. Phones were out, recording everything. His dramatic revelation hadn't gone as planned. This isn't over, Sarah, he snarled, turning back to me. You think you've won? I'll fight you for every penny. I held up the envelope again. You mean like these pennies? I pulled out a bank statement. The ones you've been embezzling from our joint account, or maybe the ones from my father's inheritance that you invested in that fake business account. David's face went pale again. Behind him, Megan took a step back. What's he talking about, David? She asked, her voice small. I couldn't help but smirk. Oh, Megan, did he tell you he was wealthy? That he could take care of you? I wonder how much of my money he's been using to fund your romantic rendezvous. I don't know what she's talking about, David stammered, but his eyes betrayed him. The private investigator found everything, David. The offshore accounts, the fake business, the money you've been siphonning off for years. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I'm an accountant, for heaven's sake. Megan's face had lost its defiant look. David, what did you do? Nothing. She's lying. But his hands were shaking as he reached for his phone. The police already have copies of everything, I said calmly. So do the tax authorities. Your phone won't help you now. David looked wildly around the room, like a cornered animal. Then he turned and ran, pushing past shocked guests, heading for the exit. Megan stood frozen, looking lost and confused. You should go with him, I told her. After all, you found someone better, right? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. After a moment, she too turned and fled, leaving her purse and wrap behind. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, someone started clapping. It was Emma's grandmother, of all people. Others joined in, the applause spreading through the room like a wave. I turned to Jason and Emma, my heart breaking at the tears in their eyes. I am so sorry, I said, moving to embrace them both. This isn't how your wedding day was supposed to go. Mom, Jason's voice cracked as he hugged me tight. Why didn't you tell me? Because this was supposed to be your day. Your father made it about him, just like he always does. But it's not going to ruin your happiness. I won't let it. Emma wiped her eyes, smearing her perfect makeup. What can we do? Should we end the reception? I straightened my shoulders, looking at the young couple before me. Absolutely not. This is your wedding day. Your father and Megan are gone, and good riddance. Now, I turned to the band, who had been watching everything in shocked silence. I believe it's time for the mother-son dance. The band leader nodded quickly, and the opening notes of What a Wonderful World filled the air. Jason took my hand, leading me to the dance floor as guests cleared a space. "You're amazing, Mom," he whispered as we began to dance. "I'm so proud of you." I held my son close, feeling stronger than I had in years. "No, honey, I'm proud of you. Now, let's show everyone what real love looks like." 3 months after the wedding, I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. David wasn't present. He was too busy dealing with his legal troubles. The financial fraud investigation had revealed even more than I'd initially discovered. Turns out, he hadn't just been stealing from me, he'd been embezzling from his company for years. "Congratulations, Mrs. Thompson. Or should I say, Ms. Parker?" My lawyer, Deanna, smiled as I reclaimed my maiden name. The judge's ruling was quite favorable. "Better than favorable," I said, looking at the settlement details. I'd gotten the house, my full inheritance back, and 70% of our assets. David's white-collar crimes had made the divorce proceedings surprisingly simple. As I walked out of the office building, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Done with the papers? Emma's making your favorite lasagna. Come over for dinner?" I smiled, typing back a quick yes. My relationship with Jason had grown even stronger since the wedding. What could have torn us apart had brought us closer together. At their new house, Emma greeted me with a warm hug. "I made garlic bread too," she said, leading me to their cozy kitchen. "And wait until you hear the latest about Megan." I raised an eyebrow. The aftermath of David's announcement had become something of a local scandal. "Do tell." "She tried to join the country club last week," Jason called from the living room, where he was setting the table. "They rejected her application. Apparently, having an affair with a member's husband while he's committing fraud isn't great for your social standing." I couldn't help but laugh. Megan had discovered rather quickly that David wasn't the wealthy prince she thought she was stealing. After his assets were frozen and the investigation began, he couldn't even afford their love nest anymore. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her sister in Ohio. "Have you heard from Dad at all?" Jason asked as we sat down to dinner. I shook my head. "Not since the plea deal. He's too busy preparing for his hearing next month." David had agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges, but he was still looking at significant time in a minimum security prison. "I still can't believe he was stealing all that money," Emma said, serving the lasagna. "What was he thinking?" "He was thinking he'd never get caught," I replied. "That's the thing about men like your father, Jason. They believe they're smarter than everyone else, that the rules don't apply to them." "Well, the rules definitely applied this time," Jason said, reaching for the garlic bread. "By the way, Mom, how's the new job going?" After everything happened, I decided to make some changes. I left my accounting firm and started my own consulting business, helping women manage their finances and protect their assets. The irony wasn't lost on me. "It's amazing," I said, feeling genuine excitement. "You know how many women have no idea what their husbands are doing with their money? I'm helping them take control, teaching them what to look for, how to protect themselves from disasters like Dad." Among other things. I took a sip of wine. "But enough about him. How are things at the hospital, Emma?" As Emma launched into a story about her pediatric residency, I looked around their warm, loving home. This was what family should be: support, love, and honesty. Not manipulation and betrayal. Later that evening, as I was leaving, Jason hugged me tight. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You showed me what real strength looks like." I felt tears prick my eyes. I had to. I couldn't let him take everything we had. "No," Emma joined our hug. "You showed everyone that sometimes finding someone better means finding yourself." Driving home, I thought about how different my life was now. The big house that had once felt like a showcase for our perfect marriage now felt like my sanctuary. I'd redecorated, donated David's things to charity, and turned his home office into my yoga studio. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Diana. David's company was suing him for restitution. They'd frozen his remaining assets, including the money he'd hidden in those offshore accounts he thought were so clever. I deleted the email without responding. David wasn't my problem anymore. My phone rang. It was a potential client recommended by another woman I helped. "Miss Parker," the nervous voice said. I think my husband is hiding money from me. Can you help?" I smiled, opening my laptop. "Yes, I can. Let me tell you a story about what to look for." Sometimes when someone says they found something better, they do you a favor. They free you to find what's best yourself. And as for David, well, he can tell Megan all about his better life from his prison cell. Me, I'm too busy living mine.